Imagine waking up one morning and realizing most people around you just don't question anything anymore. The world's gotten so loud, so fast, and so overflowing with information that the human mind, once this incredible tool for curiosity, reasoning, and growth, has dulled into passive acceptance. Think about that. What happens to a society when critical thinking disappears? When the ability to reason, to challenge, to reflect is replaced by quick reactions, surface-level opinions, and collective echo chambers? That's what we're talking about today, something some philosophers now call collective stupidity. It's a phenomenon where huge groups of people start thinking shallowly, accepting whatever narrative is put in front of them, and giving up their intellectual independence without even realizing it. And by the end of this journey, I want to share what I think is the most urgent truth of all, one that might decide whether we reclaim our minds or lose them completely to a system built to keep us comfortably numb. Let's start with something uncomfortable. Thinking is hard, and in today's world, it's often discouraged. Our environment doesn't reward careful thought, it rewards speed, emotional reactions, and fitting in. And that's not an accident. From algorithms designed to feed you exactly what you already want to hear, to education systems that prize memorizing over exploring, we're being conditioned away from critical thought. Noam Chomsky, the famous philosopher, warned about this decades ago when he talked about the manufacturing of consent. It's the idea that power structures keep people manageable by training them to consume without questioning, to agree without really understanding. When people stop thinking for themselves, they're easier to control and easier to deceive. Critical thinking used to be a basic human skill. Now, it's seen as inconvenient. It slows down online debates. It gets in the way of outrage culture. It challenges popular ideologies and asks the dangerous question, but is this really true?
So, how do we get here? One big reason is information overload. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin found that the average person today processes 5 times more information per day than just a few decades ago. We're bombarded with notifications, messages, breaking news, opinions, ads, constantly. And our brains weren't built for this. When the brain is overwhelmed, it takes shortcuts. It leans on mental habits, cognitive biases, and groupthink just to make sense of things. Instead of carefully evaluating ideas, we look for cues, especially from people we trust or influencers we follow. This is called social proof, and it's a survival mechanism. The problem? It's easily manipulated. Ever see a post online with thousands of likes and just assumed it must be true or important? That's not logic talking, that's a psychological shortcut. And shortcuts like that are exactly how collective stupidity spreads. Not because people aren't smart, but because we've been trained to follow signals instead of using reason. Another major factor? The decline of deep reading. Neuroscientist Marianne Wolf has shown that digital media is rewiring our brains. We skim more, we jump between tabs, we struggle to focus on longer texts. But critical thinking needs sustained attention. You can't really analyze, reflect, or deeply understand something if your attention span is fractured into little pieces.
So ask yourself, when was the last time you read a full article without checking your phone, or heard something provocative and paused to think about it instead of instantly reacting? These small habits, once common, are fading away. The late Carl Sagan warned that we live in a society deeply dependent on science and technology, yet hardly anyone actually understands either. His real concern wasn't just ignorance,
It was the erosion of our ability to think critically about the very systems our lives depend on. And here's the truth. In a world drowning in opinions, hot takes, and ideological battles, the greatest rebellion is the quiet act of thinking clearly. But critical thinking isn't just uncomfortable because it's hard. It's also uncomfortable because it's emotional. It forces us to admit we don't know everything. It challenges our ego. It creates cognitive dissonance when our beliefs clash with new evidence.
And in a culture that worships certainty, confidence, and identity, that's threatening. So instead of thinking, we defend. We retreat into our tribes. We repeat slogans. We avoid uncomfortable truths. We've replaced real conversation, the kind of Socratic dialogue that's driven philosophical progress for centuries, with quick dismissals, cancellations, and echo chambers. What we're seeing now isn't just a decline in thinking, it's a social shift toward mental laziness. And when people stop thinking, they stop questioning. When they stop questioning, they're wide open to manipulation, propaganda, and fear. So here's the question we all need to be asking. Who benefits when a population stops thinking for itself? That's where we're heading next, because the forces behind this go deeper than most people realize. They're woven into our daily lives, our institutions, and even our sense of identity. And reclaiming our ability to think isn't just a personal choice, it's a moral responsibility. In the next section, we're going to trace how the systems around us evolved, not to encourage critical thinking, but to shut it down. And once you see it clearly, you can't unsee it. Let's start with the education system, because this is where a lot of the conditioning begins. John Taylor Gatto, an award-winning teacher who later became one of the most outspoken critics of traditional schooling, once said, "The truth is that schools don't really teach anything except how to obey orders." Think about that. Our modern school systems were designed during the industrial age, not to create independent thinkers, but to produce predictable, obedient workers for factories. From the moment we're kids, the focus isn't on how to think, it's on what to think. Creativity is boxed in. Original ideas take a back seat to memorization. Conformity is rewarded. Curiosity? Often treated as a distraction. The message becomes clear early on. Follow the rules, stay in the lines, don't ask too many questions. And this pattern doesn't end when you graduate. In adult life, at work, in the media, even among friends, you learn that questioning the consensus can be costly. You might get labeled difficult or controversial. You might be excluded. That fear of social exclusion is powerful. It's enough to silence even our most important doubts. Over time, silence turns into complicity. Erich Fromm, the psychologist, talked about this in his book, Escape from Freedom. He explained that a lot of people secretly want to give up their freedom of thought, because real freedom comes with responsibility, and responsibility can be scary. If you think for yourself, you can't blame others for your ignorance. You can't hide behind the crowd. You have to face the uncertainty of truth. And for many people, that's just too much. So instead, we choose comfort. We choose distraction. We choose simple answers over complex realities. And in doing so, we become easier to control. Now, social media has poured gasoline on this problem. What started as a way to connect with the world has turned into a battlefield of opinion wars, outrage cycles, and algorithm-driven manipulation. Every platform is built to keep you scrolling, reacting, and consuming, not thinking. You're nudged toward content that confirms your beliefs. You're encouraged to respond instantly, emotionally, and often angrily. The platforms don't reward truth. They reward engagement. They thrive on division, not understanding. And in all this noise, the voice of reason gets drowned out. Thoughtfulness feels slow, even irrelevant. Why stop to reflect when reacting gets you more likes?
Marshall McLuhan, a media theorist back in the 1960s, warned that the medium is the message, meaning the way we get information shapes how we think. And today's mediums? They push speed over depth, outrage over nuance, and certainty over humility. Even truth itself is distorted in the age of misinformation. What's true often matters less than what's viral. Instead of judging ideas on evidence and logic, people judge them on popularity. How many people agree? That's not democracy. That's cognitive tyranny, the majority opinion overpowering reason itself. So, where do we go from here? It starts with asking better questions. Questions that cut through the slogans and demand real answers. Questions like, who's telling me this and why? Who benefits if I believe it? What assumptions am I making right now? When was the last time I really tried to understand the other side? These aren't easy questions, but they're necessary.
Because the cure for collective stupidity isn't just intelligence, it's courage. Courage to be wrong, courage to learn, courage to say, I don't know, and then go looking for the answer. Socrates once said, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. That wasn't false modesty, it was an invitation to stay curious. The sad reality? Today, humility is rare. Certainty is celebrated. Arrogance is mistaken for wisdom. Everyone wants to talk, but few want to listen. The irony is, the best thinkers are often the quiet ones, the ones observing, reflecting, taking their time. They know wisdom doesn't grow from noise, it grows from stillness and focus. But here's the catch. If you give up your ability to think for yourself, you give up your freedom. You become a puppet, your strings pulled by forces you can't even see. And these forces, they're not abstract. They're the companies profiting from your addiction to mindless scrolling. They're the politicians thriving on your emotional reactions. They're the institutions built on your obedience. The moment you reclaim your mind, you start seeing through the illusions. You stop being a passive consumer of ideas and start being an active seeker of truth. And that, no matter how small, lights a fire. It's the same fire that's burned in philosophers, scientists, and truth-tellers for centuries. In the next part, we'll get into the psychology behind why even smart, educated people fall for these traps, and how our own brains can trick us into believing what we want to be true instead of what's actually true. That's where things get even more interesting and a lot more personal. To really understand the rise of collective stupidity, we have to go inside the mind itself. Because even if you're intelligent, educated, and aware, your brain is still wired in ways that make you vulnerable. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman, in his book Thinking, Fast and Slow, explains that we have two systems of thought. System 1, fast, instinctive, emotional. System 2, slow, deliberate, analytical. System 1 is great for quick survival decisions, but it's also prone to snap judgments and bias. System 2 is where deep thinking happens, but it takes effort. In our always-on, high-speed world, most people are stuck in System 1. There's no time or willingness to slow down and engage System 2. So we lean on mental shortcuts, stereotypes, and gut feelings that feel right but are often wrong. And this is where the manipulation comes in. Politicians, marketers, and media outlets know how to play this game. They boil complex issues down to simple us versus them narratives. They use emotional language to bypass reason.
They repeat messages until they feel familiar, and familiarity feels like truth. Once we accept something as true, our brain will fight to defend it, no matter what evidence shows up. This is called confirmation bias, and it's one of the most powerful mental traps there is.
This is called confirmation bias, and it's one of the most powerful mental traps there is. Think about your own beliefs for a second. How often do you look for information that contradicts them? How often do you listen to opposing arguments without already planning your rebuttal? If you're honest, probably not as often as you think. It's not a personal flaw, it's human nature, but it becomes dangerous when we don't even realize it's happening. Then there's groupthink, when the desire for harmony in a group leads to bad decisions. Psychologist Irving Janis documented how even smart, well-intentioned people can make catastrophic choices when they suppress dissent to keep the peace. Challenging the group feels risky. Going against the grain requires more than intelligence. It takes integrity and courage. But here's the thing. History's biggest leaps forward have always come from people who broke away from groupthink. Galileo, Darwin, Nietzsche, Martin Luther King Jr. They were rejected, ridiculed, even attacked, but they kept thinking and speaking anyway. Of course, there's a cost to critical thinking in a society that punishes doubt. You risk being misunderstood. You risk losing friends. You might even risk your reputation. But what you gain is clarity, self-respect, and the quiet confidence that your beliefs are truly yours, not ones that were programmed into you.
So why do so many of us feel lost, anxious, or unfulfilled, despite having more information and technology than any generation before? It's not about what we have, it's about what we've lost. And one of the biggest losses is inner dialogue, the ability to sit with a question, explore it, and let the answer emerge over time. We've outsourced our thinking to machines, media, and public opinion. But no algorithm can tell you what's true for you. No trending topic can replace your own inner voice. The way forward starts with awareness. Awareness of your mental habits. Awareness of the sources you consume. Awareness of when you're thinking and when you're just reacting. A great tool for this is metacognition, thinking about your thinking. Ask yourself, what's influencing my opinion right now? Am I open to being wrong? Am I engaging with this idea or just absorbing it passively? Another is dialectical thinking, holding two opposing ideas in your mind while exploring them. It's mental strength. It helps you move beyond right versus wrong into deeper understanding. But let's be real. Critical thinking isn't something you pick up overnight. It's a discipline. It takes reading, not just headlines, but books and full arguments. It takes listening, not only to people you agree with, but especially to those you don't. It takes humility, the kind that accepts uncertainty as part of the process.
And above all, it takes rejecting intellectual laziness. If something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. If everyone around you believes something without question, that's your cue to pause and investigate. In a time when ignorance is loud and confidence is often mistaken for competence, thinking deeply isn't just a personal virtue, it's a public service. The future of any society depends not on how many opinions it has, but on the quality of its thought. And that kind of change doesn't start with mass movements. It starts with one person choosing to think clearly in a world that doesn't. The core reason critical thinking is disappearing isn't that people can't do it, it's that they're afraid of what it might reveal. To think critically is to risk your psychological safety, your identity, your beliefs, your tribe. And for many, those are too precious to question. We've been tricked into thinking we are our ideas. But you are not your political party. You are not your religion. You are not your social group. You are a human being with the capacity to evolve. The moment you detach your worth from your current beliefs, you begin to grow. Critical thinking is more than an intellectual skill. It's a spiritual act. It's choosing truth over comfort, growth over certainty, and freedom over approval. It's living with your eyes open even when the light burns. Because once you awaken, you can never go back. And maybe that's exactly what the world needs right now.